You are listening to the Wholesome Way podcast, hosted by Alexander Lobb. Please keep in mind, everything shared in this podcast is for inspiration only and shouldn't be taken as medical or professional health advice. If you're making changes to your health routines or lifestyle, please check in with our qualified health professional first. This episode will begin in 30 to 60 seconds. During that time, you're going to hear a few words from two of our very generous sponsors of the show with some pretty awesome offers. So listen to this. And now, on with the episode. Welcome back to the Wholesome Way podcast. Today, I have a very special guest on the podcast, Rob Rabe. And Rob is going to be helping us find our wholesome way today. Now, Rob is a certified professional life and leadership coach who turned his own midlife crisis into a powerful mission to help others to do the same. With over a decade of corporate leadership experience and training as an IPEC practitioner, Rob uses core energy coaching to help men navigate major life transitions, find clarity, and turn their struggles into a midlife awakening. Welcome to the show, Rob. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Alexander. Great being here.
Thanks. Amazing. Yeah, Rob, I was listening to your a couple of your videos on YouTube, and I really liked your tagline, which is knowledge is power, but action is impact. And I really loved that. How did you come up with that?
Yeah, I was thinking about, obviously, when you're creating things, you're thinking, oh, I should have a great conclusion or great one-liner. And for me, and I think for a lot of us, it's very easy to talk about things that we want to do. And they're genuine when we talk about them, right? We don't talk about them because we don't care about them. We really want to do them. And most men really want to take action. When you talk about emotions or energy, they kind of don't want to go there, or it's a little uncomfortable. Although with some men, they're fine going there. But I always think that one thing I learned in the last couple of years is that when you have insights are great. But if you don't write them down and you don't do something with them, they're just useless. And so I really wanted to have something that would stick with people, that was, of course, punchy and memorable, but memorable in the sense that it would serve them well and encourage them to take action. That you can have all this knowledge and not do anything with it and miss out on the full benefits of it. Like many people have said, we don't have a knowledge problem, we have an application problem. And so I came up with that because I thought I really want to plant the seed with people that it's great that you now have this knowledge, but go and do something with it so your life can really be changed for the good.
Yeah, I love that. I resonate with that a lot also because myself, I love reading books. I know a lot of people who love to read books when they've got the time. But I think one thing that I found myself doing is almost falling out of love with reading because I was reading all these self-help books, but I wasn't putting anything into action. And therefore I felt like I didn't deserve to read the next book, which is a weird feeling. It's kind of like a limiting belief. It's like, just read whatever you want, right? But I think for me, it almost came into, I put into question, why am I reading these books? Like, obviously I'm interested in self-help, but why am I not doing anything? So yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think a lot of people struggle with that and they blame time. But I think, what you've discovered is actually, it's actually about energy, right? Protecting your energy so that you have time to take action. Because time is finite. We don't have control over that.
Yeah. And I think, speaking on that, so as you had mentioned at the start of the show, I studied core energy coaching. That's the methodology. And to break it out into very simple manners, it just basically means going from the inside out. So change from the inside out. Like with personal development, and like you mentioned with books, it's very easy to get into a routine and to have this appearance of discipline, this appearance of growth. But real growth is inward, it's not outward. I mean, obviously, you can engage in habits that help sort of reprogram you in a better way. That's better than maybe maladaptive behaviors you've had in the past. But really, like, it comes down to the heart or the core. And if you don't get to the core, it's just going to be a temporary change. And so that's why I chose the coaching school that I did, was because they were all about transformation from the inside out. And so there's a lot of coaching where it's more focused on how do we get you to your external destination or your external goal. But most of the clients I work with, they don't come to me because they're going, I really want to have the appearance of a guy who has it together. They come to me because they're going, I have reached a point in my life where this is not working anymore. And I don't have people to talk to about it. And I don't want to stay here. I want to create something different. And when we start to get into it, you start to discover things like, I'm in the middle of my life and it's kind of downhill from here. Or, okay, that's all well and good, but do you know how old I am? I can't restart. So just even as you hear that, even when we were talking before we started recording, you're talking about how the power of words. And so if a man is believing that I'm in my 40s or I'm in midlife, because really it's more like 38 to 55 is the midlife zone. If you're believing that you're too old to do something, that is a belief that you maybe believe at your core, but it's holding you back from the life that you could have, and it's not serving you well.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. Yeah, I'm actually I have a client right now with my life strategy coaching, and that's exactly what I'm helping him with is that limiting belief of, he's pushing 60 and he believes that he had this limiting belief, I should say, in the past where he was too old to change.
Yeah.
And it's just not true. As you mentioned through your program and through your videos, it's like, you have this innate power to create the life at any given point in time. Like it's your life. And once you realize that actually life is an open world game, I like to use that metaphor because it really is. Like we think that we're in these boundaries, and we're taught that as kids, and we can go down that route. If it aligns with you in terms of education, when kids are taught about themselves, they aren't. That's the reality. They're not taught to be in touch with emotions. They're not taught to be autonomous. I think they're taught to be dependent, which also obviously has some. There are some positives around that. If you're talking about general order versus chaos in society, I get why that exists, but to what detriment?
Yeah, you touched on something really important, because when you try to identify, well, when does the midlife crisis begin, or why does it come then? And really, if you were to trace it way back, I could speak for myself. I know when I was young, the question you would hear a teacher ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And I would freeze and go, an astronaut. And they said, you're going to have to be good at math. And I went, oh, great. Well, that's not going to happen. But just even in childhood, you're encouraged to find your career, or maybe even you grow up and your parents have an idea for what your career should be. And you just accept these things without questioning them. And then it goes just unnoticed. And then you think about it, you fast forward 2-3 decades later, you've now come to an impasse where you're living a life that was prescribed to you and is not in alignment with who you truly are and who you really want to be. Now, of course, there are people, of course, that from a young age, they know what they want to do. I had a good friend growing up who knew exactly what he wanted to do when he grew up. He had it all planned out. And I was always jealous of him, because I go, gosh, that must be nice to have it figured out. Because for like my story, I mean, it took me a long time to kind of find my way. And even in my 20s, I didn't finish school until my mid-20s. By that time, most of my peers were married, having homes, families. I felt extremely behind, because I was thinking, well, I've been told here's where I should be. And this is not aligning, and it caused a lot of stress for me. And then I really struggled to figure out even how to earn a decent wage for a long time. But as you can see, like from what I explained earlier, so much of it started when I was very young. And it really wasn't until the middle of my life where I realized that I, I'm doing a career that I honestly didn't choose. It wasn't a bad career, and I got a lot of benefits out of it. But it was sort of, I just went along with it. Like rather than making the decision, I kind of slid into it, kind of glided into it willingly,
Mm,
and just going, well, okay, that sounds good. I'll just go that way instead of making the decision for myself.
yeah. I think the one thing that I've learned from, the conversations I'm having with all my friends, we're all turning 30 this year and next year. And a lot of my mates, including myself, we're finding ourselves starting to think about, this, what's ahead, because when 30 hits, everyone starts to have kids, you should have the mortgage. And I
Hmm.
think I've got a mate who, he had a panic attack, because he was in this state of mind that was like, and he changed careers, and he just blew up, just got too overwhelming,
Hmm.
because it's a really big new chapter that you're starting. You kind of have to start telling yourself, hey, I need to grow up, and start,
Hmm.
planning. I've always just sort of coasted through uni and got by and been able to afford things and go on holidays, but then suddenly you're like, hey, all these other guys are doing this, and I'm, as you said, I'm falling behind. So one thing I
Hmm.
wanted to ask you, Rob, is, yeah, tell me tell me this. Do you think that we just, like, some of us just need to just go through it and just push through, um and work at it until it happens, or is it something that we actually can plan from an early age? Do you know what I mean? Like 20, like you mentioned your mid 20s, you're sort of like coasting, but you mentioned one of your friends like always knew what he was going to do, and he had it all planned out and he kept making those steps. Um, do we need to, like, is it possible for us to do it that young, in 26, or should we just be experimenting and floating around and just experimenting, trying things, and yeah, how do we know what type of person we are at that age?
Hmm. That's such a big question, right? And I'm certainly no expert in terms of like, here's how we should change the education system. Um, but I know from at least my experience, which is one I can talk about, that's actually validated, is that were I to talk to the younger version of me, I would encourage him to explore, to try things, to try a lot of things. Because I really feel like in your 20s, it's such a great opportunity to explore, try things out, try things on, see what fits, um, uh, travel the world. But I do think from a young age, it would be helpful to just figure out, what are my giftings? What are the things I really love? Like, what are the things that light me on fire? What are my values? Um, and I think it's very common for us to get into this place of thinking, well, you need to be thinking about what you want to do for your career in the beginning of high school. I saw what my youngest daughter went through, and how much of it um, really brought up a lot of stuff in me, and thinking, oh, it's so, it was just exhausting watching her go through it. And I can't imagine how challenging it was for her, how stressful and overwhelming, and thinking like, you need to have it figured out by senior year because you're going right into college after this. And I feel like that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. I think there could be a lot of value, um, to really figure out what it is that you love, what it is you would love to do, rather than waiting till later in life. I think those are ways in which you could sort of prevent the midlife crisis. And not necessarily that it's a crisis. It's more of just like we had talked about, an awakening where this doesn't happen to everybody. And it's not as significant, at least from what I've read from the research, is that it's not as significant as it was in the 1950s. Like it's a little less severe when people reach midlife, but there are some patterns where your body's changing for a lot of millennials, in their mid 40s. They have aging parents that they're taking care of. They have a family they're taking care of. They're in their career. They feel they're probably in a higher position, so there's a lot of pressure there. That you're raising kids or finishing raising kids. So there's just that big sandwich in between, and so for a lot of guys, I was no different. Is that I didn't really explore what I wanted to do, and it took me a little longer to figure out what is it that I would like to do, and how do I figure out how to do that. It was just like I just couldn't figure it out, and so it really messed with me because I thought, like, how is it that everybody else has it figured out? And so I'd often walk around going, "You know what you're doing? Yeah, me too. Yeah, I know what I knew too." Kind of just this posturing of like, "Yeah, you don't know what you're doing?" No, I do. I was just making conversation. But I didn't feel like a really safe space to come out and go like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'd really love to learn how to make money so that I don't have to be stressed about meeting my bills every month. Well, these are not things that are necessarily covered in school.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I think that people, yeah, I think to experiment, that's one of the common themes I've actually heard from people like interviewing them is in your 20s, it's a great time to experiment. And I really love the word that you used, awakening, instead of midlife crisis, because it's almost like you immediately take away the desperation when you use that word instead of midlife crisis. I'm hearing quarter life crisis coming up.
Mm-hmm.
in vernacular around my sort of generation, which you could say is like a little bit precious. Like, come on, yeah, you guys are young. Why are you
I'm
saying
so
you're
glad
having
they're
a
going through it
quarter-life
younger, though.
crisis? Yeah, well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's better to have it earlier than later, because you're sort of thinking about those things than when it's almost too late. But I think it still stands. I believe that that word of awakening is better to use than I'm having a crisis. Because it's not a crisis. I mean, it's just you're becoming aware of something that you haven't been thinking about, but you haven't been ruminating about or putting energy into, and it's important. And it's important because you feel those emotions.
Feel it deep inside.
Yeah, you feel it coming out within you. Like don't push it down. Let it express it.
And the thing too, you look at it, and I think this is where, especially for a man, it can feel very unnerving when everything you knew, you're starting to have that creeping feeling that this is not working, and I don't know who to talk to about this.
Yeah.
And I think to help reframe it, I think it's really good to look at it as, imagine that your deepest desires and your most fulfilling dreams are begging to come out, and that you don't have to be afraid of it. And it's okay to not know. I mean, how many times in your life do you not know what to do? But everything's figure outable. It's not as if the answer won't eventually come to you with some reflection or just asking some older, wiser people. But I looking at it as like, this is an opportunity for you to have the life that you really, really want. Like, there's, sometimes you could be in these moments where you're thinking, there was a version of myself that I imagined I would be when I got older, or that I long to be. I think about becoming that man, and I just feel so stuck where I am that it feels impossible to get there. And it's a terrible feeling. But imagining that the discomfort that you're going through and that crisis or that awakening, it is really an opportunity for you to finally step into that. And I think were people in midlife to consider that this is a gift, they would probably receive it differently and use it differently, rather than just going, well, I am trapped now in this feeling and there's no way out, which is not true. Because like you said earlier, we are the authors of our life, right? We get to decide what we want to do. We can take action and change things at any point. And I truly believe that as long as you have breath in your lungs, that it's never too late to change. Like you talked about earlier, like you always hear older people. Okay, when I was growing up, I remember some older people, one in particular, who is this older New England woman. And she would, she'd have the voice and the accent, and she would just say, "This is who I am. I'm never going to change. I can't change." And I used to just always look at that and go, really though? Do you think so? Because I don't believe that's true. And so for anybody like who's listening to this, like they may be in a place where they're thinking, I don't know about any of this. But if you're still alive, you're still breathing, your story is not over. And there's many things you could do, many turn of events that can happen in your story to where you can start living the life that you truly want.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Tell me about the story about when was the last straw for you? You talk a lot about in your midlife, late 30s, you were making six figures, but you were feeling nothing, like you were just desensitized to it. Tell us about the story of how you came to that, and what really pushed you over the edge, so to speak.
Yeah. So for me, I know there was, when we got our house, I was obviously thinking, okay, we got to pay a mortgage and I need to make more money, which was actually like factual at that time. And so I just, was on a mission to get a higher paying job, to reach a certain level of income, thinking like, this is going to make me feel so much better, which I realize sounds so silly in retrospect, but it's truly how I felt from the inside out. And I'm not going to lie. And I remember getting there, and I remember signing the offer letter and just going, okay, that's it. And nothing changed. It was just, okay, the numbers changed a little bit and that was it. And sure, it's helpful because it made it easier to pay the mortgage and other bills like that, save money, and to enjoy life a little bit. And I think that's where I started to drift a little bit. And then when COVID hit, the entire world was struggling, and we were all coping the best that we could. And like many men at that time, how did I cope? Well, I fired up the Xbox and got into the war zone with Call of Duty. It's really embarrassing to admit. But I spent so much time there, and I used it as a means of connecting with other guys, but really as a means of escape. And with that, of course, came along other unhealthy habits where, like literally in COVID, stopped exercising, stopped eating well, overeating, in fact, drinking, alcohol to help just taking the edge off, helping me feel calmer, or just having a good time, and this is what I did. And I remember just one night sitting in my little office at 2-3 in the morning. I don't even know what time it was, but I would literally play as long as I could, get a few hours of sleep, and wake up just in time to log on, all bleary-eyed and sort of feeling pretty rough, to put in work and just kind of get by and just keep it status quo. And I remember sitting there one night, like waiting to queue in, just thinking, like, if I were to look into the future, I'm pretty sure if I continue the way I'm continuing, it's going to have definitely an impact on my health. It was already impacting my marriage. When you're choosing to spend time with a video game instead of your spouse or your partner, I would say that was a pretty low point. And I was just kind of just absent. And even with my kids, just you're not there. And I really saw a pretty dark and bleak future and thought, if I continue with this, I'm going to be all alone. Like, I'm pretty sure I'll lose my health, my family. And it was scary. Like it literally scared me. And I thought, like, this, I can't keep doing this. And I remember running across an article online that was talking about gaming. This guy who was actually an avid gamer who stopped gaming. He talked about the benefits of it and why he did it. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna give that a try. And so, of course, as soon as I got rid of the Xbox, I thought, well, it's easier to replace habits than it is to change them. And so I thought, I got to find something to fill the time. And so I started like making videos, but it was more for work of like how-to videos, help videos that would benefit my team. And that was really fun. I just thought, like, yeah, I always kind of wanted to dabble and get into content making. But as I was making it, I mean, once I got onto making YouTube content, like, it was just like, I didn't know who I was trying to talk to. I was trying to talk to everybody. But for me, it was really just realizing that, like, I am in a place that I'm not proud of. And really under that all, I mean, to getting at the center of it, or getting to the core of it, was that I was really unhappy. And I felt ashamed because I thought, why am I unhappy? I make pretty decent money. I have a great family. I have a wife that loves me. I have 2 great daughters. I have a dog. And we live in a nice, quaint little home. And like, we have a good life. And so why would I feel unhappy or unsatisfied? Like, it didn't have to do with them. It had to do with me. The fact that I'd really stopped trying. I stopped dreaming. I stopped going for things. I was just hanging out, killing time. And really deep down, I was just disappointed and thinking, like, there were dreams that I had that I wanted to make come true. And if they haven't come true at this point in my life, like, they're not coming true. Like, forget about it. So I became pretty despondent. And as a result, I medicated with those things. And just having that realization, that was a pretty hard moment. But then it was through coaching, like experiencing coaching and realizing that I don't have to stay here. Like, I remember running across a lecture by, I can't remember the guy's name, but basically the title of the lecture was Life Begins at 40. And that really struck me. And I thought, what does this mean? And he talked about how Carl Jung believed that those first 40 years of your life were just research and development. You're exploring, you're trying things. And then the next phase of life after that is, for a lot of people, some of their biggest accomplishments came after 40. And so he really believed that, like, hey, those first 40 years are just preparation. The next 40, like, that's when your life is really, really starting. And that really inspired me, as silly as that may sound, but it really encouraged me. And it helped me to take that limiting belief, like we talked about earlier, which was, I believe I'm too old. And I believe that if dreams haven't come true by now, it's too late. It's not going to happen. But once I was able to see it from a different angle, see it through a different lens, that's when a lot of things started opening up. And I started just really questioning a lot of the thoughts I have and going, okay, this is the thought I'm having, but how true is it? And what makes me believe it's true? And why do I have to believe it if I don't want to? And it makes me feel awful.
I love that. Yeah. And what you're alluding there, I think what you're alluding to there, with Carl Jung, is like, our life comes in seasons and stage and cycles, right? We kind of just tend to see life as, year by year. We're very short-term thinking, especially in Western culture, America, UK, Australia, Canada, right? We're very short-term thinking, and it restricts our ability to see the bigger picture. And I guess, when you see things like that, like life begins at 40, and, we're talking about, I was telling you about some numerology before, and, we have 3 cycles of adolescence, maturity, and fulfillment. And fulfillment, that stage, when you actually start to dig into like your purpose in life, well, you should be living it, according to numerology, is like, 50s, 60s, depends on your birth date, but that's very interesting. Kind of think, we kind of had this view that, hey, you need to get everything sorted and then, retire at 70 and then you can go and explore. But
Yeah.
I think seeing our life in seasons, and in cycles, and understanding which cycle you're in and what actions you need to take within that cycle are paramount.
Yeah.
But no, thanks for opening up about that story.
Yeah.
It was it's very inspiring, and I think for a lot of people it'll be very helpful to know that, hey, we're all going through this. Some people seem to be on top of it more than others, but you don't really know that until they really open up to you and say, hey, I'm actually really struggling with my financials. Like, I've got the great car, but underneath, there's mountains and mountains of debt. For you, Rob, you mentioned, asking for help. I think as men, we like to, especially if we have a partner, our partner, her or his mental state often can be dependent upon you having it all figured out and being, the alpha male and having everything sorted, earning a lot more money and all that. So I think we really struggle to ask for help. I think so. How did you go about, when the the last straw came to you? How did you go about asking for help, and who did you find, and how did that make you feel?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, really, the first place I went was God. Like, figuring out, like, he made it abundantly clear. Here are the areas that you can work on. Here's what you can do, and giving guidance. And then after that, it was probably harder for me during that time to ask my wife for help. And why it was hard was just I felt embarrassed, just thinking, like, I felt bad that this was the person she married.
Wow.
And so I wouldn't say it was easy to go to her to ask her for help. She's, of course, the best help I've ever had in my life, and I wouldn't be where I am without her today. Even from when we were just friends and then dating, she really helped me so much in my professional growth and really figuring things out and growing as a leader, not only a leader at work, but also a leader in our home. I would definitely say it's much easier. It's pretty easy for me to ask for her help now, and understanding that we're in this together and that two is better than one. And you can accomplish so much more with two, especially if one person's tired, the other can help in supporting them, bringing them along, supporting them, carrying them. But I would say outside of that, where I went to for help, honestly, was online. I would read articles. I would watch a lot of content. I'd listen to podcasts of other males who had also stories of living a life full of anxiety, grinding it out, trying to be the man that they were believing that they should be, being strong men. And so I listened to a lot of that content, and that really impacted me. And especially when I found things about, like, I remember there was one when I was trying to get back into working out, like exercising, because I definitely believe exercise is good for the body. And that has such a benefit on your mind, especially early in the morning. Like, I would work out and just feel so energized for the day and would be in such a good mood. Because you think about, like, how can you pour into somebody else's cup if you're not pouring into yours and, like, filling that reservoir so that you can show up powerfully for those around you. And I remember seeing a clip of this guy who was talking about, it's not about like working out hours a day. And he was saying like literally, if you just are committed to saying, okay, I'm going to start small. I'm going to start 5 minutes a day, and I'm going to do 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day of some sort of exercise. And I'm going to do that for a little while. And then I'm going to start to progress it or increase it a little bit. I found that very helpful. And you know what? It was helpful because, well, it's talking about the core energy in me was, I felt shame. I felt embarrassed. I felt like, boy, it's really hard for me to just have a proper workout because of where I am physically right now. And I remember for me, it was like almost like a higher energy level of like showing compassion to myself, not entertaining the thoughts of, boy, you used to be able to do this. Like, look at you now. And like, wow, okay, 5 minutes, that's all you're going to do, or 15 minutes, that's all you're going to do. And I remember just saying, I'm going to be gracious to myself, and I'm going to do a few minutes of something each day. And if I've met that goal, great. And then awesome, I've done what I said I was going to do today. I kept my promise to myself. And then I did that for several weeks, and then I amped it up to like 10 minutes a day, doing some push-ups, some jumping jacks. And that really was the gateway for me. But I didn't stop there. And I think this is where this is important for men, is that you can experience such good benefit from exercising. And it's a great thing. It's very beneficial. But only focusing on the outer appearance or those outer behaviors, like we talked about earlier with habits, if you're not getting to the core of things, then you're not really going to experience like a sustainable transformation. And so for me, it was really having to get into a lot of beliefs that weren't serving me well anymore. And so that really helped me. And so again, to summarize, like, where did I go at that moment? Well, definitely went to my journal, definitely reflected, meditated on it, and thinking, okay, what can I do? Talking to other guys and listening to content from other guys was incredibly helpful. Really, really helpful.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's a big one. Yeah, it's acceptance, of yourself and not being too judgmental, based on you in a different period of time. You're not, if you're in your 40s, you're not going to be exactly the same as you were in your 20s, but you might get real close. But you have to give yourself the compassion that you're a different version of yourself, and whilst you might be not as physically strong, mentally you have done a lot of work, which you could actually say inevitably ends up affecting your physical state as well, because you have that mind-body connection, which you obviously do a lot with your coaching, with the core energy. Tell us a bit more about how the core energy program works. That's the right name, right? Core energy.
Yeah. Core energy coaching. Yeah.
What's that all about? How does it work? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So whenever I work with a client, we do what we call an energy leadership assessment. And this assessment is an attitudinal assessment. And it's really measuring where somebody's energy is when things are good, and when you get some sort of trigger, some sort of stressor that's introduced. And so they have this framework within that leadership of these 7 levels of energy. And it's just a way for people to be able to conceptualize and picture it. So the lowest level being a feeling of apathy, or like the core thought being a victim. Now, men don't like to think in these terms. So a better way to think of it is just that feeling of being stuck. You've probably had many times in your life where you've felt stuck and going, I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. And I feel pretty bummed about it. I feel apathetic. And then the result is, or your actions are that, well, I don't do anything about it. It's like lethargy. And then going all the way up to the top, where you have like the highest level of energy, where it's like non-judgment, pure joy, just pure creation. And then you have levels in between that, like we talked about earlier, Another one of the levels is level 4. And this is a level of like compassion towards others, compassion toward yourself. And so they're able to get a snapshot of where they are at that moment to see where their energy is or their emotions or their feelings, so that they can, because self-awareness is really kind of that first part, right? If you're not aware of what's going on, it's hard to do something about it, right? Whereas when they see the assessment and we walk through it, then they can see, oh, interesting, that's what's going on there, and here's how it's playing out. So obviously, somebody who's in midlife who's really struggling or really feeling challenged, they're going to feel those lower states, that level 1 of just feeling stuck, that level 2 of feeling angry, and going like frustrated, just going like, what is going on? I don't know what to do with this. And that really sets the stage so that we have a framework and can understand better, like, what are we feeling? What's going on? Because, if you look at it, you have your thoughts, which influence how you feel. Your feelings definitely play a big part in how you act or how you behave, whether it's internally, externally, and then how you act, leads to your results or your outcome. And so then once they have that framework of the energy levels, then they can they have something to be able to attach it to and label. Not label in a way that makes you feel put in a box, but more of having words to describe something. And so then when we get into the core energy coaching, if you meet with somebody, like a lot of the clients I meet with, the energy that they're in is they feel stuck, or they feel frustrated because they're not living the life they want to live. And they've probably not been living it for a while, and they feel stuck and feel like it's just like, I just better just, this is just how it is, and I just have to accept it. And so then we get into the core of that of, well, why do you believe that? And so that's when we then start to explore, what are the stories that are going through your head? Like, we tell ourselves some funny stories. And I'll never forget hearing the saying somebody said about how, like, if we treated our friends like we treat ourselves, we'd be put in prison. We'd be locked up because we're inside our heads so mean to ourselves. And so that's where we explore, okay, what are the stories that you're entertaining? What are the beliefs that you're having? How are you interpreting things? Like, you may look at something and interpret it a certain way and going, well, that's this, and it may not serve you well. Or one of the biggest ones, you may have an assumption and going, well, I tried that in the past and it didn't work. I was just talking to a client recently, and they're talking about the job market's so hard. That was a belief they had. They probably have a lot of evidence to support that. It's probably been pretty crummy, pretty competitive, pretty hard for them, a lot of rejections. So it's understandable that they would believe that, right? It's understandable they would feel that way. They'd feel apathetic about their situation.
But did that arise because they believed from the start that the job market was competitive?
That's a great question. My opinion on that is that they heard others say it, but then also they had experiences that definitely confirmed it. So they're thinking, this is pretty true. And so when you start to get those assumptions, you start to think about how the assumption basically is history just repeats itself. That's what an assumption is, that, oh, because the last job didn't go good, the job market's just hard and I'm not going to apply. And it's now been a month or two and I don't know why I can't get a job. Now, I don't say that to criticize them. We reflect that back and going, what would you like to do? Do you want to stay there? Or, let's get into that story. Because once you start getting into the stories, you start to realize that that's where the changes can begin. I remember I had another person that I'd worked with, and we literally just had one call. That's all we had. They really wanted to start working out again, getting that routine, but they were afraid to get back into it because they didn't know how their partner would take it. And they were afraid to bring it up. Now, because of how they believed that person might receive it, this story they made up in their head. Once we started unpacking it, they looked at it and just went, gosh, that's so silly. And they didn't have to feel silly about it, but then came the challenge of, what do you think about talking with your partner about this and saying, hey, COVID happened. A lot of us put a lot of habits aside because we were just trying to get through it. I really want to get back to working out with you, getting a routine going again. Is that something you'd be willing to do with me? Sure enough, they had that conversation. And the very next week, they got right back into the routine. And I remember checking in even a few years later. And I asked them, hey, how are things still going? They said, still going great. Still had the routine. Nothing had changed. If anything, it just got better. Imagine had we not had that one conversation, they stayed in that story, what would have happened? What they would have missed out on. And not only that, like, exercise is great and all, but what they would have missed out on is really connecting with their partner. They would have missed out on the relational part.
Yeah.
All because of a story in their head that they made up.
And I think sometimes we're afraid to express our thoughts, right? And we often, sometimes with our partners, we sometimes kind of expect them to read our minds, or maybe even like for them to bring it up. We're kind of like, as you mentioned, apathy and lethargy, we kind of just like wait for them to say, oh, are you okay? And then it's kind of like you get the permission to then
glad
speak.
you asked. Let me tell you how I'm feeling. And then they're like, great. Why I asked?
Thank you so much.
You're like,
yeah.
I'm holding this in a long time, huh?
Yeah, totally. It's like, find that fire, that courage to just, say how you're feeling to a partner. And especially when it's something important like that, like exercise, and you never know how your relationship might change or enhance or blossom because of that. It sounds like this couple, that's one of their biggest commonalities, and an activity that they love, that they can actually be proud of and love each other through this other medium. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that. Such a beautiful story. I wanted to touch on, because I know I was watching a couple of your videos, and I loved that video that you did on around productivity. I think this is like, I always have, us being men, men love talking about it. We love productivity. We love efficiency.
We love fiddling and dialing things in, right?
We love automation. Like,
it's so good.
My dad's like that too. Like he's obsessed with robots. So he'll buy like the next gen robotic lawnmower, or like the robotic vacuum cleaner, and he loves like configuring the backyard to make sure it stays. Yeah, he's an early adopter. He loves it, and he'll have like the new watch to like track his golf swing, and yeah, it's great. We love hearing about dad's new tech.
Yeah,
but yeah, I really want to touch on productivity, because I know it's a big part of your coaching, or I can assume it would be. I haven't been through your program, but I really loved what you said about and we hear this a lot, doing less to achieve more, or around that sort of slogan. Can you unpack that for us a little bit? Because I think a lot of my mates, we always talk about how to be more productive, how to take action, and is it with this productivity tool? Is it with Notion AI? Like, I've got this, I just have my reminders, and I tick it off, and I get that dopamine when I tick it off on paper. So does it come down to a tool? Does it come down to experimentation? Can we unpack what does that actually mean? Like, doing less to achieve more. How do we do that?
Yeah. What that means at its core is that there's a lot that we do that may not be really important or moves the needle. So obviously that's kind of corporate speak, but if we were to look at that, what that basically means is there are things that you do that really change things, and then there's a lot that we do that doesn't actually have a return on investment. It's just, well, it made me feel good to get that done, but what was the result of that? And so I remember years ago, after I had a motorcycle accident, had to have surgery, and was just like, well, I'm laid up on the couch, so I got nothing to do but read. And at that time, my daughter was young, so I'd walk her to school, and I'd pick her up on the way home. We'd hit the playground. But I remember during that time doing a lot of reading, and there was a book that I ran across called The One Thing. And it was such an impactful book because, and I still use that in my systems today, where each day I'm thinking, what is the most important thing I need to do today? And focusing on that. And so I think in terms of productivity, obviously systems, we could talk about systems. There's a lot of systems you can use to set yourself up for success. And it's probably works differently for everybody. But if we were to look at like getting things done and doing less in order to gain more, I think really comes down to focusing on the most important thing in the day or the week that you want to focus on. And the thing that's really going to have a return on investment. And so, for me, I take it a step further. I look at, okay, what is something that I'm putting off that I want to take care of, that I need to take care of, and it's making me feel so anxious that I'm just going to do a bunch of other stuff on my to-do list so I don't have to look at it. And so I started taking a different approach and going, where do I feel like garbage? What is really stressing me out? And doing that thing, and putting it as like, this is, if I only get one thing done today, if this is it, I'm gonna feel so good. And so I started taking that approach even further. So not only just like, what is the one thing you can do today? And then of course, after you complete one thing, then you go, all right, what's the next one thing? Because obviously we can do more than one thing in a day. But I found it just like, I love the simplicity of it. And I love even more when I had that epiphany of, I'm going to identify the one thing that's stressing me out, that's making me uncomfortable, and dealing with that. For example, I have to call my benefits provider because they messed up the repayment. And I'm like, I really don't want to talk to them because I know I'm going to be on the phone for 2 hours. It's going to consume my whole week. It's super frustrating. It's stressful. I'm talking to somebody who is just following a script, who's not really listening to what I'm going through. And so I've started to prioritize every day the thing that makes me feel uncomfortable and just doing it. And that the funniest part is that I always find that I'm surprised that it took way less time than I thought it would. Now, of course, with health insurance stuff, that's no joke. That literally can take hours sometimes. So I don't blame people when they put that off. But for other things, when I think about, okay, I need to do this one thing, and I don't know how to begin, that's uncomfortable, right? You're going, I don't even know how to approach that. And so I found it to be so useful in just confronting when I don't feel great about something. It really helps me in just changing my energetic state. For example, even today, I had like a notification of some mail that I got, and it was from the IRS. And I'm like, I do not even want to look at that right now. And I'm not kidding. Yeah, like I started like, I'm like, my hands are getting clammy. I'm like feeling tightness in my chest. My guts are messed up. And I literally waited till like 4 o'clock today to open it and read it. And I'm like, oh, it's actually a refund. That's cool. But you think about it, from the beginning of the day until 4 p.m., I felt awful. I felt anxious. I felt uncomfortable. And I'm going, I put myself through misery for that long when I could have just opened it. And here's the thing, Alexander. You are capable of handling anything and everything that comes your way. I truly believe that for everybody. And I think when you look at that, like internally, what I'm believing is that I don't know how I'm going to handle that. And then at 4 p.m., I open it and going, I could have handled that. Could have handled it quicker. And so I found that to be just a great guide for me as I'm doing productivity. I got so into productivity years ago and being like, how can I find the perfect system. I set up time blocks with myself. I got my priority A. I'm using the Eisenhower matrix. And I'm like, this system is so complicated and overwhelming. It takes me like an hour just to set it up for a day. So then I really love just simplifying it and going, okay, what's the one thing that I can do today that's really going to have an impact, whether it be at work, whether it be in my life. For example, what's that one conversation you've been putting off that you need to have? What is that one piece of news that you need to tell that you've been putting off because you're like, oh, it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to feel just kind of not very manly or strong. I don't know if I want to talk about that. Or like, I got to go get the car washed. Simple things like that. Like, we put in so much energy, or I should say we drain so much of our energy because we look at one task and think, oh, I don't want to do that. And I was guilty of this. I'm sure other people are, and I'm curious for you, Alexander, what your experience is. But I know I would often have a ton of things on my list and would prioritize the things that were either easy or made me feel good in the moment. They weren't the things that were hard that would make me feel better afterwards. They were the things where I'm like, I crossed off 20 things. That feels so good. And then there's that one thing I haven't tackled that I just kicked the can down the road for 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the quality versus quantity, which you talk about, right? Mm-hmm. You can look at like 20 things you've crossed off, but what's the level of quality of those tasks? What's the level of satisfaction and positive energy that comes from from completing those tasks? Whilst the scary one might appear to be out of reach or really scares you, I think the satisfaction of completing it afterwards, outweighs all 20 of those other tasks that you ticked off. Yeah.
I always love to think about it. Like what can be helpful for people is just thinking about, okay, here's that one thing. It's a big thing. And I really would prefer to put it off. But if I were to only do one thing today and I did that, I always love to have people envision how good are you going to feel afterwards. And then I always find that when there's a big thing you need to do that you're putting off, there is a story going on in there. There's a story, and it can be helpful then to unpack it. So like, even if people don't have a life coach, they can easily ask themselves, what is the story that I'm telling myself about this? Like, what is that core thought? What are those thoughts doing? Like, which thoughts are coming up? And exploring that. And sometimes it's easier for somebody to just identify and going, I feel anxious about that. Just sometimes it's easier to identify, here's the emotion, the feeling, or the energy. And then working backward from there and going, okay, so what is the thought that comes up when I think about this? And then when you can understand, like, here's the thought, here's the feeling, here's what's leading me to do, then you could find the opposite and going, okay, even if I don't believe it's true yet, what is a more empowering thought I can have that would serve me better? And then focusing on that and being able to feel differently about it. Because when we feel differently, when we feel excited or we feel hopeful or feel like, I can handle that. It's easier to then do the thing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Rob. That's a huge golden nugget. Hope everyone listening today is taking some notes and ready to take some action, and because you can handle it. Rob says you can.
Yeah.
Rob, I've really enjoyed this conversation today. It's been fantastic to see eye to eye on a couple of these things, in your core energy work, and also talking about, what we're experiencing as men. I think it's really important to have these conversations and share it with others, and just to know that you're not alone, and everyone's got it sorted in different ways, and that's okay. We're all on a different timeline. But love it. Rob, I've got a couple of bonus questions I love to ask my guests at the end. Perfect. If you've still got some time to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Shoot. Fantastic. Cool. Number one, what is your number one guilty pleasure?
Oh gosh. I would definitely have to say eating ice cream that has been delivered, that I don't have to go get from Handles. We have this ice cream shop called Handles here, and then watching K-drama or Korean drama with my wife on the couch. It's always a
Nice.
great time. So I'd say that's
K-drama.
definitely, although I wouldn't say I feel guilty about the K-drama, but I do feel guilty about when I'm starting to have ice cream like every day. I don't feel a little bit guilty.
Nice. Yeah. Love that. Yeah. We're all human. That's why I like to ask that question.
Yeah.
The book that changed your life.
Mm. Mm. One of the most impactful books I read in my early 20s that really changed my life was this book called Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. And I think this is a great book for any of your young male members of your audience to read, because it really talks about identifying those things that really light you up, really, that you're really passionate about, and learning what those are, exploring them, and figuring out how you may be able to make a living off of it, or find some way in which you can strike a balance to do a job that you like, and outside of that, it funding you doing the things that you love. And for me, that was such an impactful book, because it helped me to just look differently at life and what I was doing for work, and not losing touch of that. Of course, it took many years for the good work of that book to happen. But I would say that was just a really impactful book that I read.
Brilliant. I have to check that one out.
Yeah, it's a good read.
We've talked a lot about your past, your life experience, but if you had to put it down to one, what would be the greatest life lesson you've learned to date?
Oh, boy. The greatest life lesson. Can you give me an example? Like for you, what does that mean?
For me, it means something that really turned my life down a different path. And, it could be around mistakes that I've made or what I really enjoy. So one thing that I learned was that, life lesson is that I can create my own reality, and labels are so dangerous,
Mhm.
Like I used to tell myself that I have imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
which is like completely like just within my imagination. It was a story that I was telling myself. So I think, you know, for
Yeah.
me, it's like, yeah, these stories, you know, they're they are all a figment of our imagination, and we can choose
Yeah.
to overcome them and stop using and use more empowering words.
Mm. I would say the greatest life lesson to date is that nothing is wasted. I think it's very easy to look at life and think, what a waste that was to explore that, to try that. For myself, my personal experience was it took me almost 6 years to complete university. And then I
Mm.
made it in film for maybe 3, 4 years before I exited, thinking, this is not conducive to the kind of life that I want to have. And that was a really hard decision. And I struggled with that for years, thinking, what a waste. What a waste that was. But then I look back all these years later, and I still remember it was a winter night. I was living in New England at the time. I couldn't find a gig to save my life. And I had already been feeling like, oh, this, I don't feel like this. I should stay with this career. I got to get out of it. But I felt really stuck as to like, what am I going to do? And so I remember just being in a place where it's just, I was fasting, was praying, trying to figure out, God, like, what am I supposed to do? And I ended up getting a job, a temp job, a job through a temp company, working as a file clerk. And I felt even lower at that point because I just thought, I got an education and spent X amount of dollars to do this with my life. Like, I could have just skipped university and just gone straight to the file room here. And I remember it was a very low point in my life. And for many years, I remember looking back and being like, gosh, like I failed in one career, and then I got to healthcare, and then I got into learning development. And I just remember so many times just thinking like, why did that happen? And why couldn't I have figured it out sooner? And I think the lesson in that is that there is so much material in the experiences that you've had, whether they're experiences you're proud of or experiences you're ashamed of or embarrassed by or that you don't want to talk about. But there is so much gold in them because were you to reflect on them and going, what are the lessons that I can gain? And in fact, even what were the things that I did gain? And I can look back on it years later and thinking, if I had stayed in the film industry, like what I saw people who worked really long hours, who had great homes and wives and children that they hardly ever saw. They had extramarital affairs. They had substance abuse issues. They were stressed. They had ulcers. I really had a hard time seeing what the benefits were to staying in that. And so it was really hard for me to leave it. But I look back on it now and just think none of the time's ever wasted. None of those things. There's so many lessons and all the skills that I gained at that time, while they felt like they were dormant, many, many, many years later, those skills have come into play with making content that impacts people's lives positively, helping people in their learning and like what I do for work. Yeah, just all of it. Like I can look back and go, it's never wasted. All those things, there's so much value in them. And I think were we to reframe and look at it differently and going, what are all the things that I gained? What are the lessons that I get to learn there? Because sometimes, like there's an old proverb that says there's more to be learned in the house of mourning than in the house of feasting, meaning there's more to be learned from hard times than the good times, because the hard times, they cause you to reflect. They cause you to think, to really think on life and think about what am I doing? What should I be doing? Whereas when you're having a good time, you're not really thinking about, challenges. And I really do believe that challenges are really just opportunities wearing a mask. That were you to look at them and going, there are no challenges, there are no problems. These are all opportunities. Now, there's certainly been many times when I see an opportunity, I'm like, this is a terrible opportunity because I'm uncomfortable. I hate this. I don't want the lesson right now. And I just, I'm fighting against it. But then I can always look back and going, I'm really glad that I tried that. And it really put me out of my comfort zone. It really made me feel such and such a way. And I could have even, looking back to when we were talking about earlier, like what was that final straw? What if I had just gone like, I don't care about this final straw. I'm going to continue on this path. I can look back and go, gosh, I would have missed out on so much. Not only that, like me, but I think about the people who I've come into contact with, the lives that I have supported in transforming. Like I would have missed out on creating so much good in the world and supporting people and creating good in their lives, that I would be so sad to have missed out on that. And so I really always love looking at that and going, the time is never wasted. My wife has often told me that, because I would feel really bad and going, I wish I'd started doing what I was doing 10 years ago. I feel like I really wasted time. And she'd always remind me and saying, God doesn't waste your time. None of the time's ever wasted. And it continues to be a well that I can draw from, to learn from, that promotes not only my good, but the good of those around me. So I'd say, yeah, that's probably one of my biggest life lessons so far.
Yeah, well said. Beautiful, Rob. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And finally, where can our listeners, our wholesome wave finders, follow you on your journey and reach out to you after this?
Absolutely. Well, you can find me on Instagram at reignite leadership. You can also go to my website, iamreignited.com. You can sign up for newsletter if you want to. And really, just starting to build this thing up. I'm just trying to build a library of content that will really benefit people. So of course, I'll be creating more content, releasing more content in the preceding months. That's where they can go to learn more, follow along in the journey.
Amazing. Thanks, Rob. I'll put those links into the show notes, the description. So please check them out. Say hi to Rob. follow his newsletter, his Instagram, if something really resonated in you, or if you want to learn more about, Rob's philosophy and pick his brain on something.
Absolutely. Always happy to entertain any questions, or if you want to email, my email's on the website, so people can always email me or send me a DM on Instagram if they want to. Happy to entertain any questions.
Fantastic, Rob. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Well, that's it. We'll wrap up that episode for now. Please rate the show if you haven't already on your podcast app. It really helps spread the word of, trying to find that wholesome way, a more balanced and purposeful life, and to which Rob has contributed towards so openly and generously today. So yeah, please do that. And until next time, stay wholesome.